that revealing in a useful way? Good. We'll talk more about it today as we're going to get to the perfection of joyful effort, which is also all about overcoming laziness. So, Tanya, we'll get to your vow today if you're online, the one that you asked me about. So let's just sit quietly for a minute and settle ourselves. We'll just take maybe 2 minutes in silence and allow yourself to arrive in a way that's meaningful for you. And then allow yourself to bring into your heart something that you saw recently, or it could have been a long time ago as well, that inspired you, an action that you witnessed someone else do or maybe just heard about, that was an action of great compassion and love. And it could be the simplest thing, like you witnessed someone sneeze and you saw someone give them a tissue. But a moment where you saw someone drop their own selfishness, their own constant self-awareness, and put another's needs first. And when you have it clear in your mind, simply allow yourself to spend a moment here enjoying that beautiful occurrence that you witnessed, and feel grateful that you can see things like that in your life, and allow your heart to be filled with inspiration by this action. And then nice and gently make the transition from this space of stillness back to the room, no rush. So oftentimes when we talk about bodhicitta and being a bodhisattva, a being who is 100% focused on their fullest evolution of consciousness out of the desire to really serve others and to do good in the world to the greatest degree that we're able, we often focus a lot on other people's suffering. This feeling of compassion, this desire that opens up in our heart when we recognize that other people's suffering is the same as our suffering, and we feel that connection. And then we want to reach out and help them and alleviate their pain. And that's really key and really important. But I think another side, or the flip side of the coin, is that as we become more aware of others and as we turn our life to serving others and turn the microscope away from the self, we also see all kinds of beauty and joy. And we should become increasingly aware of the outstanding things that we witness people do all day long for other beings. And that can inspire us, should inspire us. So part of the practice of being a bodhisattva is that you practice being increasingly inspired by those around you. And that fuels you for the times when you're meeting with someone suffering. If you're only focusing on suffering all the time, you will get exhausted very quickly. There's a lot of suffering in the world, and of course we see it, and probably all of us are here to some extent or another because we've been overwhelmed by our own suffering or the suffering of other beings. But equally, that must be balanced with the awareness of all of the joy that there is in the world and all of the beauty. And if you don't have that, your practice is very dry and very depressive. And that's not what we're going for. And even in a space when you're with someone who's in extreme suffering, it's not constant. And we forget this with ourselves too when we're in suffering. It's not suffering, right? There's moments, there's little waves. And Ram Dass always tells this story about this woman who calls him in the middle of the night, this student, and she says, you have to call me back. I'm going to commit suicide. I'm about to commit suicide. I'm completely depressed. And so of course he calls her back, and she gets on the phone, and she's completely in a state, a hysterical state, and he can't really have a proper conversation with her. And he says, could you put on the phone the woman that called me and asked me to call her back? Because I'd like to have a conversation with that person. Because that person is actually not about to commit suicide. That person is thinking, I need help. Where's the number for Ram Dass? I should call Ram Dass. And that person has some space. And we forget that when we're in that state, that we have that sanity still with us. And even though it may only come in like mini breaths, but it's there in the spaces between the kind of craziness that we go through. So if we can start to recognize that in others, that's a gift that they give us, and then we can be able to recognize it for ourselves when we're going through those challenges. So, look for that, particularly when you're with others who are in pain. I'm not saying you deny their pain at all. I'm just saying also acknowledge when there's lightness present, when they can take a breath, when they smile, when they're not, maybe when they're just not in intense suffering of some level or another, okay? And then even more so, continue to open your heart and think about for yourself, what is your relationship to being inspired? And are you open to being inspired as much as you could be? Or is there something, sometimes our pride gets in the way. We see something amazing, but we sort of think like, well, why can't I do that? Or, I could do that. I could do better. I can curate if I put my mind to it. Big deal. Like these things come up at us. So they're so ridiculous, but they block us from they block us from the truth that if we're seeing it, we are doing it actually. Because we're all interdependent. This idea that somehow you alone are going to do everything. You, by yourself, a singular being, are going to save all living beings. That's, I think, a gross misunderstanding. Part of coming into contact with wisdom is recognizing that because we are interdependent, you have like the Avalokiteshvara, you have these 1,000 arms, right? It's not that you personally, literally are going to grow 1,000 arms. It's that you can start to experience that feeling where you're in a space, or you hear about a doctor helping someone, and that's you. Or the person who's at the old folks home right now is you. And that's not to the point where you go, oh good, so I don't have to do anything, right? But you do what you can in your life, and you recognize what other people are doing, and you try to move everyone towards the greatest good, okay? So that we don't try to like suck all the potential to do goodness to ourselves, so that we're sort of unhappy when we see other people do goodness. We get into that space too. We get jealous, or again, these afflictions that come up, and then we can't be inspired. We can't do our best. So do your best, and just practice going around being like, wow, that was amazing, whatever you did. And really try to see the small things, because it's in the small things, like, wow, whoever thought to put this water here, that's amazing. That takes a moment of mind that is not focused on oneself. And any moment of mind that is not focused on yourself is a free mind, a mind that is free from suffering. So if you want to end people's suffering, anytime you see them thinking of someone else, you should be rejoicing, because they're not suffering in that moment, you see? So in a way, you're doing your job as a bodhisattva by going, I see you. I see you taking care of other people. I rejoice, I celebrate for you. You're not suffering in that moment. And of course then, as we know, when people acknowledge what we do, we feel good. We're like, oh, someone saw that. I'm going to do it more. It helps to be seen. So part of what I'm talking about here too is that a big part of the job of the bodhisattva is to see, to simply see, become a seer. We don't use that word so much anymore in our vernacular, the S-E-E-R, the seer, right? Someone who's a seer, someone who can see. And I'd say 99.9% of the job is that. But what is the quality of your seeing, you see? What is the vision? What are you looking for? Because you will totally find what you're looking for. So if you're looking for suffering, you will find suffering. If you're looking for joy, celebration, the potential of peace, you will find that, even within the suffering. Okay? So this is a key part of what I want to talk about today as we go through the vows of today. And I think last week we were talking about including people in your world, and the challenges of that, and this is part of that, is to include the good, as well as the challenges that come up. So we went through the root vows, and we started the secondary practices last week, which are all surrounded around the 6 perfections, right? So let's review. Not Luna, because she answered last week so well, and not Jenny or Dima or Heather, because I know they know them well. So what are the 6 perfections? Yep, giving. Yep. Patience, good. Concentration, joyful effort, and wisdom. Great. Between us all, we know them. Fantastic. Okay. So we went through the vows that help us work on our practices of giving. And now we're going to move into the perfection of ethical life. So the vows that support that. And those were in your readings from last week. We didn't get to those last week. So sometimes there's a number of vows. There's 9 practices that go with the perfection of ethical living. And again, these are 9 actions that undermine that practice. So if you cease from doing these 9 actions, you're naturally upholding the perfection of ethical living. Okay? We should maybe just review before we go into the 10. For those of you that have refuge vows, you're keeping these 10 core practices of non-harming. So what are those? Yeah, the 10 virtues. Yeah, so protecting life. Right, protecting property, protecting relationships. Those are the ones of body. So in the negative, they would be not harming, not stealing, not harming people with your sexuality or trying to break apart people's relationships, okay? And then speech, yeah. Honesty, yeah, so not lying, good. What else? Yeah, meaningful speech, right? Yeah, speaking gently. Is that right? Not doing harsh words. That might be speaking meaningfully. Is that what she meant by speaking meaningfully? So no idle speech. Okay. So let's try to go in order. So it's good. No, this is great. This is great. So honesty, so no lying. And then what's after that? No idle. Yeah, gentle speech. Yeah, so not speaking harshly. Yeah. And then no divisive speech, so don't try to draw people apart with your speech. And then no idle speech, so speak meaningfully. Okay? So those are the those are the 4 of speech. And then we have 3 of the mind, which are the core. So as we're gonna talk about today, these 7 in relative situations out of compassion and service to other beings, you may, from an outer view, break these 7. You never ever break the last 3 of mind because they're of mind. So you're not getting over that, right? So what are those 3? Craving, ill will, and incorrect view, right? Views that cause pain. So the positive form of craving is what? Yeah, celebrating for others. Good. So as we were just talking about, being able to be inspired, being happy for other people's successes, and particularly in this context of the Bodhisattva, being inspired when you're seeing other people taking care of others and putting another first. Ill will, what's positive of that? Yeah, feeling for other people's pain. Okay, so you can see these are the 2 core practices of the Bodhisattva. So we're turning away from the core movements of the mind that cause us pain. The one movement of the mind that causes pain is somehow celebrating for other people's pain. Either through, at the lowest level, we just ignore it. We just are, and this really does take effort, even though it might be an unconscious space, but you just are so numb to what's going on around you that you're just numbing out to people's pain, okay? And if you've ever been in a situation where someone is really suffering over a prolonged period of time and you feel like you can't do anything, you might have watched this happen where you just sort of start to go, I cannot deal anymore. There's nothing I can do. And it's a self-protective mechanism, but it backfires on us in time, okay? So that's the one of ill will. And then the one of craving is that we somehow want to take other people's happiness away. We have this misunderstanding that there's some finite degree of happiness. I mean, that we don't literally think this when we're having the feeling, but that's what it points to. You know, if you have any kind of jealousy or any kind of feeling, you know, like, why is she so happy? Then you misunderstand happiness. It's like, oh, so there's only this much happiness, and she has some of it, and I don't have enough of it. But there's infinite amounts of happiness, you know. So someone else's happiness is certainly not taking away your happiness, and so we have to overcome that. So those are the 2 core practices of a bodhisattva, and if we're practicing those 2, so we're opening our hearts to other people's pain, we're removing the barrier that we put up between ourselves and others, so that we can feel the suffering in the world, so we can actually do something with it. You know, if you have no connection to it, you can't move it, you can't do anything with it. If you're separated from it, that's it. It's just going to sit in your life forever, you know, and to be celebrating and be happy for others. If you're practicing those 2, then you are practicing the 3rd of mind, which is wisdom. Okay? If you're not practicing those 2, then you're practicing wrong view at the end of the day. All the other 7 of body and speech will come because you're not doing those 2. Okay? So at the end of the day, if you're focusing on opening your heart to other people's pain, and of course then what comes from that, trying to help them, being supportive to them, doing the best you can, and you're celebrating for other people's joy, the other 7 of ethics should come easily, relatively easily, depending on what you're, you know, we all have our little niches that we sort of get in. The root of ethics, another way you can think of it,
if you want it even simpler, is the root of ethics is you just don't harm other people. And then, there are a gazillion ways we can talk about that in subtler and subtler forms, but just don't harm. And a lot of the vows that go with ethics relate to setting a good example as well. So part of the way you don't harm others is that you don't provide them models that would cause them suffering if they took on those actions. So if someone witnesses you lie, or someone witnesses you smack the fly away, you're modeling every moment of your life. You are modeling for other beings. For yourself, of course, because you're making those impressions in your mind, and for others. Don't think that others aren't looking at you. You don't have to be on a movie screen or like sitting up here. People are looking at you all day long, just as you're looking at people all day long. And there's a thing we're sort of conscious of taking in, but there's all kinds of unconscious levels of impressions that are going in all day long. People see you. They see you 100%. On the side, at this point in my life, I work in theater, and I've been through many auditions, watching people audition, and there's some kind of idea that people get that they could show you something, like they could hide something that's going on and show you something else, but you see everything. And it's like so clear when someone steps up on stage. Everything's there, and then they go, well, I worked on this, and you can see their nervousness, you can see if they're angry, you can see if they're free, you can see everything that's going on with them. And, if they're a dancer, you can 100% see their training. I could track back and tell you all of what they've done and not done, just literally by the way they step on stage. You see everything. If you're attuned to it. I mean, in that context, that's my job, so I'm attuned to it. But we receive models all day long. So think about how will you inspire others through your model. Not pridefully, not like, I'm so honest, check it out. I didn't kill the fly, I'm amazing, right? Did you see that? That of course is not a helpful model for other beings, okay? Then we're modeling pride. But there's a kindness that recognizes that you have a responsibility in the world and how you act. It's a kindness to others for you to act well, because it gives them the possibility to see something that maybe they haven't seen before. Who knows what people have seen, You might think through your life and think about a time when you saw someone do an act of kindness, and whenever we hear about those amazing things that people do, the ones that spontaneously make us cry or something like that, it's because it's a model that we haven't seen before or that we haven't taken in. It's like the king in the Banyan Deer. The king's like, this is not a model that ever came into my mind. That is real compassion. And the Banyan Deer is just living his life. He's living his ethical life. But he's providing this amazing model, okay? So let's look at these. The first one, you guys all have them? Yeah? The first one is not reaching out to those who have broken their vows. You could say it that way, broken their morality in some way or another. Sometimes it's stated as sullied morality, which is a good Renaissance version of the language. And the affliction here is that you're not reaching out to them, meaning you're pushing them away, right? Consciously pushing them away, because you have some desire to hurt them, or you're lazy. If you remember, a lot of the afflictions that go with the secondary vows are just plain laziness. But then also we have all the other ones as well: attachment, aversion, wrong view, and et cetera, et cetera. So the beings who are in extreme pain, who you see cannot keep their ethics one way or another, they are the ones that need you most. They need your model most. And they do not need your model through condescension. They do not need your model through pride. They need you to skillfully find a way to listen to them and to help them towards their highest path in a way that makes sense for them, okay? And there can be all levels of how you do that. For some people that might mean, if you know they have vows or something, you might say to them, you broke your vow, you can't do that. And, sometimes you need to be strong with people, but that doesn't always work. Sometimes you need to just sit and listen and don't say a damn thing, and let them work it out for themselves. So you have to sense it out. What is going to be best for them? Always the question. This also does not mean that you condone what the person did. So part of this vow, why you might not reach out, is that maybe there's some fear like, well, if I open myself to them and really make, talk to them about it, maybe somehow there's some sense like, so it's okay what they did. And that's not, you have to be clear for yourself. We have to judge actions. We don't know what's in people's minds, but we have to judge actions. And part of the challenge of ethical life is that you become very, very clear for yourself, where you say to yourself, okay, lying is not okay. For me, this action, I've talked it through, I've thought it through, I see how that will always cause pain, okay? Except in these extraordinary circumstances, right? Like there's some kind of revolution and they're coming to kill someone and you're protecting that person, and then you say, no, there's no one here, or I'm sure there are other, less extreme versions than that. So there are some exceptions here. So if you feel like you're not strong enough to reject their bad influence, like if you got in that person's presence, you'd be like, totally, let's smoke the pot. Like, you're right. What's the big deal? Or that there's something, you'll get caught up in that stream or the stream of gossip or whatever it might be. So it's about your relationship to knowing your limits, your own strength. What can you handle? What kind of situation can you handle, okay? If other people will be led astray by seeing you relate to that person. So you have to weigh the consequences, like, are more people going to mistake the model if you were hanging out with a certain person? And I feel like in this situation, I mean, maybe you guys can think of one, but to me, that goes more to like a major political level or something. Like I'm thinking about, so Obama doesn't want to meet with Putin, right? Like he doesn't want to meet with the Russian president. So maybe it's like if he met with the Russian president, what would all the other countries think of him or something? Like he's got to weigh all that stuff, in his mind. I don't think most of us have that level of situation going on, but maybe in certain parts in our life. So not only are we thinking what is going to be best for others, but as we prioritize our life, we should be thinking what is going to be best for the majority of people, for the majority, whatever that might mean to us in any given situation, okay? Next, if out of love, this always would have to be out of love, you think that withholding attention would somehow be a good thing to do temporarily. Like sometimes it would be a stronger model for that person. Actually, my teacher has done this to me many times, like, but it's more sort of when I'm not really relating to him properly, but I'll email him and ask him a question, and it's really not that important, or it's sort of like about me, not so much about something else, and he just won't email me back. I just won't hear back from him, But if I email him something that is meaningful or about one of my students or a vow or teaching something, he gets back to me within like 30 seconds, So after a while I went, oh, because at first I would think, oh, he's just busy. He'll get back to me, like it'll happen, Then I realized, no, he's not busy. He's just not getting back to me, And then like years later, I was traveling with him, and I was talking about another one. I was asking him about something a challenge I had with a student, and he said, "Oh, just don't email them back." And then he looked at me. He's like, "I think you've experienced that before." I was like, "Yes, I have. Thank you very much." So, and those are really helpful. And so in those moments, I was like, "What exactly did I say in that email?" And I would go back and look at the email and go, that's a waste of his time. Like, that's totally not what I need to be writing him, So if it's out of love, that you're not responding to someone because you think that would be most helpful to them, that would be the most direct way to get your message across, then fine. And similar to the first exception, if you don't think you can control your own mental afflictions, but this would be more like, maybe someone has done something that actually has made you really angry, and you feel like if you got into conversation with them, you would just start yelling at them about it or something like that, okay? Then don't. But you would want to try, as with all these exceptions, you would want to try to hold in your heart, a wish that you would be able to overcome these so that you could connect directly with this person in the future, okay? And sometimes, you know, when we talk about these, not reaching out to someone who's broken their vows, I changed it to morality here because it's a little less constrictive. But everyone has vows of some kind or another. Everyone has some model for themselves. They may not have kneeled down in, you know, a center and clasped their hands together and worn white and said, please, please, you know, let me live an ethical life. But they have a model for how they want to live. So if you see someone acting against, you know, some kind of ethical living, they're breaking a vow. And we know it. It's not, you know, even young children, although for some they sort of seemingly have to learn, but it's just not like you have to teach someone that it's not helpful to kill other people. It's like that's sort of clear, given the pain that it creates them when they do it, you know, or to lie or so on and so forth. Okay, so next one is failing to follow ethical living, which if followed, inspire others to develop faith. I read one version of these and a commentary on these, and this vow was stated as not studying the Dharma, which I thought was interesting, so I just wanted to mention that. Because of course, if you were studying the Dharma, you would be suffused with practices that would inspire others, so that was interesting. The idea of this, again, is that your ethical living protects others. It protects the minds and hearts of others. Not only simply, you know, physically, if you're trying not to harm others, you're not stealing from them, you know, you're not trying to harm them with your sexuality, that's protecting them on a physical level. But it's also protecting them on a level of their mind, and that's key. You know, sometimes when we take vows, I think this has particularly come up for a lot of people that I've worked with around the vows that have to do with not drinking and or taking drugs or things like that, non-intoxicants. And people are like, well, what happens if I go out with my friends and everyone's drinking and I'm not drinking, you know? And I always say, well, again, what you're looking for, you will find. So if you're hyper aware about it, you're going to make everyone else hyper aware about it. You know, if you're like, no, I don't drink. No, I'm not going to have a drink. I'll sit over here. You know, like, then of course they're going to be going, what's going on? You know, but if you're just totally fluid about it, it's not even going to come into their minds about it. You know, so sometimes we get embarrassed to have others see us keep our vows in a certain way. This can come up for people. And so you just have to think about, is it going to be helpful for someone to see you openly keep your vow? So there's ways we can kind of be more outwardly present with our vows and ways we can be very quiet about our vows. And you know, again, you can go out into the world and sort of just look around and you can see people who are sort of fastidious in their presence about how they are with people. Do you know what I mean? That word, you know, it's like you can really see them taking care with their speech. You can really see them taking care how they place something or how they sort of work in a room or something like that. That would be someone where I would say, oh, they're keeping their vows outwardly. Like I can really see them sort of living in an ethical way. You know, and then there are other people who are like, you know, throwing food around and just, you know, kind of living their life. And I would say, okay, that's a person who's keeping their vows inwardly. And both are useful models, like both provide different things, you know? So you have to ask yourself, what's going to be better for the person I'm with? Are they going to be inspired by seeing me be very openly caring or very openly, you know, mindful about my speech, my body? Or is that going to make them feel like, oh, you're such a goody two-shoes and I'm a big loser, you know? Oh, I see, you're so thoughtful and I'm not. You know, and sometimes, and then that's not inspiring them, you see, then they're having a negative reaction. And of course, you do the best you can, but it's for the other person. Your vows are for the other person, you see? So what do they need? What do they need from you? And this doesn't mean you break your vow, by the way. It just means that in certain circumstances, you might be more relaxed, you know? Or your relationship to something like idle speech or divisive speech, you find a way that's not going to turn the other person away to keep that vow. And in fact, you find a way that would bring the other person towards you so that you could help them go out of those spaces if they're gossiping or they're, back talking on someone. You wouldn't go, I don't think it's a good idea to gossip right now. You might just, I always like to just change the subject in a really light way. Just try to find an in, and then I'll be like, how's your mom doing? Just sort of put a little wedge in on the side and little distractionary tactic. And then they're off it for a minute, and then we can sort of see where we can go. That's a tactic I use a lot. It seems to work. So don't worry about your reputation. In this instance, you want to be thinking about what's going to be helpful for the others. Okay. And one way to inspire people 24/7 is allow yourself to be happy. When you're happy, I'm not saying force yourself in some way to go around going, everything's great, I'm fine, But bring an awareness, become increasingly aware of your gratitude and your ability to be present. Right now, maybe we all have little afflictions passing through our mind, surely we do, but everything's pretty good. Y'all look beautiful, you're all well dressed, it's a nice day, we're probably well fed, we're breathing, we're not intensely sick. What's wrong? So we can talk about these more subtle things now, you see, and that's fantastic. So we can actually look more closely at the afflictions that are passing through that we would miss if we were really sick or freezing cold, or it may get too hot to concentrate in an hour, we'll see, right? Or we were starving. You can't have a class like this on these vows if you're in those situations, and we're not like that. So it's just common sense and it's just sanity, and it is our responsibility to actually recognize our situation. And we should all have a baseline of gratitude and happiness through the whole day, except maybe in extreme circumstances. And then, of course, depending on where you are in your practice, you would have a baseline of peace and happiness there too, okay? But don't space out on your situation. We're all doing great. Really, everything is really good for us on a base level, okay? And it's an inspiration to others to allow that to be present in your awareness of yourself, okay? Being bummed out about having vows or keeping an ethical life does not inspire others to have an ethical life. Being somehow pissed off about your practice, well, I meditated this morning, had to do it, that's not helpful for others, okay? And again, just think about what kind of model you want to offer forth. In one of the practices that I know many of you have studied, or some of you have studied, we think about all beings as our mother, right? There's a sort of flip side to that where we think about all beings as our children. And so if you think about if you were in front of a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old, they repeat anything you do, right? So how would you want to be through your day if everyone you were with was a 4-year-old? What would you want to be giving them? What would you want to model to them? And mostly what we do when we see children for the first time is we go, hi, right? We offer them a big smile. We offer them happiness. We don't go, how are you? I had a hard day today. I'm not feeling so well. Even when you're as sick as possible, if a little 3-year-old walks in, right, how do you react? You're like, oh, hi. That's that impulse we should have with all beings all day long. Hi, how are you? How are you? What's going on? What are you doing? Is that your chair? Is that your reading? That's awesome. You got a reading. For real, it's, that Jesus says, right, to enter the kingdom of heaven, you have to be like a little child. You have to be able to meet that innocence, and we all have that in us. It's not hard to find, it's just we forget. So if it helps, think about everyone as a 3-year-old, and yourself, of course, as a 3-year-old. and meet them that way, and at least in your first moment, because you'll model that. That'll be the first impression that comes for them, okay? Somehow we get older and we all get really serious, and then we start to get really serious with everyone else. And okay. The next one. So performing deeds which are of a lesser benefit to all living beings. And another way this is stated, which I like, is having only a little energy to benefit others, which is an interesting, another way to think about it. So this is really about priorities. So you can think to yourself, how much of your day, these are similar questions that we've been asking in all the classes here. How much of your day is leading you to connect with other beings in a meaningful way? And how much of your day are you confirming your suffering habits in your relationship to others? Okay? And how might you shift that ratio? You know, if you really sat down and did an inventory, you know, maybe at the end of the day today, you can sit down and just think, you know, it doesn't take more than a few minutes. These are not really complicated on the surface questions. And just think, well, if I think through my day, how much time was I thinking about myself and my own issues and my problems and what I need and what I don't have? And how much time was I able to look and go, hi, how are you? What do you need? You know, did you lose your toy? Can I help you find your toy? That's horrible. Oh, you have a boo-boo. I'm so sorry. You know, in a loving, you know, honest way with others. And probably if we're really honest, of course, our first thing is like, no, I'm a good person. I'm pretty good. You know, it's probably like a good balance. You know, but unfortunately and fortunately, as we get stronger in our desire to be a bodhisattva, we get stronger in our fervor to really be of service to others, we look closer and closer and closer. And as we do that, we start to see that the percentage of our awareness of ourself grows. You know, and then we go, well, maybe I thought of others like 3% of the day, and 97% of the day I pretty much thought of myself, you know. And then something can come up where, and it's good when this comes up, the self, the kind of beast of the self starts to rise and go, what about me? What's gonna happen if you thought about me only 3% of the day and others 97% of the, like, that's not gonna work out. You know, and then you can really see that is the self that is killing you. I mean, that is the beast in there. That is the devil. If there was a devil, that would be the devil. Is that thing that rises up that's like, no, this is not a safe practice. You know, if you even thought, okay, I'm going to do 50% myself, 50% other people. You know, chances are if you really took in what that would mean for your day, something is going to rise up and go, no, unacceptable. And that would be good if these practices are meant to provoke that beast. And in a way, if you're not provoking that beast, you're not really doing these practices. Or you're enlightened, in which case you don't need to be here. Or you can just hang out and enjoy the class, you know, yeah.
What was the first other way of looking at this particular vow? Like you said, doing the base minimum?
Having only a little energy to benefit others. So like you're putting so much energy towards yourself that when it comes down to it, you only have a little bit of energy to focus on others. And we can see this naturally, you know, not really so much in an afflicted way, but you know, if you have the flu, you don't have a lot of energy to focus on other beings. You just don't, you know, or in situations like that. So that's what this is pointing to, and it's sort of saying, but actually you have the flu all the time on a level of your consciousness. You know, you don't have a lot of energy to put towards other beings unless you've done a lot of work, you know, happy work, joyous work towards shifting that. So try to provoke that beast. That's really helpful, and we'll talk about wisdom next week. And then when you have the beast in your sight, then you try to apply wisdom. You go, who is that self that's rising up? Is that real? You know, and the self is going to go, hell yes, I'm real. I'm right here. You know, and then you can start to look at how you can play with that. So we'll talk about that more next week. But on maybe just a little wisdom right now, is you can ask yourself and really look into this for yourself and think, who am I thinking about when I'm unhappy? So when you're sick, when you're upset, when someone's hurt you, who are you thinking about? You can answer. Yeah, you're thinking about you, right? So this is karma, right? The cause and the effect are the same. This is the baseline of karma. The cause and the effect resemble each other. So if you're unhappy and you recognize, who am I thinking about when I'm unhappy? Me. The effect is you're unhappy. An effect is risen and you're unhappy. And in part of the mise en scène of feeling unhappy is that you are forced to think about yourself. That's the cause. There, you've got the cause right there. So is it in your best interests to repeat that cause? So when you are unhappy, is it in your best interest to continue to think about yourself? No. And we're all smart people. We've all been studying this material, so we sort of know the answers, but you have to do this over and over and over again, and in the situation, in the moment. When the anger rises, when the jealousy rises, when whatever it is rises, and all you can see is yourself, your issues. You have to draw the line in that moment. This is how you work with wisdom. You have to do it in the moment, in the field, right, of play. And go, I'm unhappy, who am I thinking about? Myself. This is the cause. The cause and the effect are the same. There is no time where I will be unhappy and not thinking about myself. That never ever happens. And you can test that out for yourself too. As you're unhappy 99.9% of the day, probably having some affliction, you just go like, is there any time where I'm unhappy and I'm like, thinking about how wonderful, she looks? No, right? So then we can look at the other side. When you are joyous, when you are happy, and this one you might need to just, it's almost a little bit more subtle because our ignorance is so strong. But when we are joyous, what are we thinking about? Yeah, other people, or if I look at the flower and the flower brings me joy, I'm thinking about the flower. I'm open to connecting to what it is out there, and then there might be a self-reflection moment where I go, that flower is so beautiful, but even that is not focused on me. Then I'm bringing into an awareness, myself is infused with the other, with the beauty of the other, or the celebration of the other, okay? Yeah.
This may not be an appropriate question for here now, but the way you describe karma makes a lot of sense to me, and then I have heard here karma being described as you are karma, and then that throws me off.
Yeah.
That concept I don't understand.
Well, you are karma in the sense of that there's not some karma apart from what's happening with you. So when you're unhappy and you're thinking about yourself, there it is. That's the whole of your karma right there. You're the cause and the effect in one. When you're happy and you're thinking about the others, you are karma. There it is. It's not like, oh, and then I go and I drink my karma, or my karma, I'm going to take the karma in. Your mind is karma. Your mind is the karma. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps.
So, try to take this in and try to work with it in the field, and notice this is a useful way to self-reflect, that when you're having a moment of joy or laughter or happiness, just click that in, that little bit of wisdom, and go, I'm not thinking about myself right now. This is the cause of my happiness. Because we're so dead set in our ignorance that when we feel pain and when we feel like we don't have what we need, all we can think is, if I got this, if I could figure this out, if you stopped hurting me, it's all going towards the self. And of course, the ignorant result of that is we're going, then I would be happy, right? If you stop doing that to me, then I would be happy, right? If I stopped having that sound of that jackhammering, I would be happy, And it will never, ever happen that way. It can't happen that through thinking of yourself, you become happy. And this is hard. It's hard when the affliction is going down. For real, it's hard when the affliction is going down. It's one thing, when we're sort of talking about it in retrospect, and we go, yes, okay, I get it, that makes sense, But when the affliction is going down, when you are in the full-on drop zone right there, unless you've done a lot of meditation and you've really taken these practices to heart, you will not have the space to go, is this a useful cause for me to continue putting into play? Is this a useful way for me to relate to myself? There won't even be any space for that. You're just going to go,
You know, you're just going to have the tantrum internally or externally, right? And you're going to recreate the causes. So it is so, so key for your health as a human being and for the health of those around you that when you're not in the drop zone, you really take some time to think about this and you meditate on it and you drill it into your mind. You think it out, you think it logically, and then it's easier to do, you know, because it's hard to do when the negative afflictions are going on. As much as you can when you're happy, try to note what's happening for you. Try to note that your attention has been turned away from yourself. And then, you know, maybe you'll create just a little bit of breath around the space where you're unhappy to go, how do I want to be right now? What cause do I want to put into play? And even having the space to think that, even if it's like, what cause do I don't like this. That little bit of space is huge. Little bit of wisdom clears everything away in time, okay? So, you know, we'll do more on wisdom next week, but just in case we don't make it to next week for whatever reason, that for me is one of the simplest practices, simple meaning I can really work with it, I feel like, in my life. I don't so much go around my life going, is this cup one or many? For those of you that know that meditation, you know, am I same or different than myself? I do those in meditation, but I don't so much walk around through the day going like, am I here or not here? You know, but I really do walk around the day, and as my afflictions come, I ask myself, what cause do I want to put into play now? I'm unhappy, I'm thinking about myself right now. How am I going to turn my attention away from myself? How am I going to make that shift? And, you know, and sometimes, like, I'm not so great. You know, it's like I have a dog and I just go like, the best I can do is I'll go pet my dog, you know? But it's like, I'll just try to put my attention on someone else. I'll water my tomato plant. Just something, you know, to care for something else. Because I can't always get it up to like call the person and apologize or to open up that space to like work with the situation, you know. But something. You make an offering to another person, you know. Okay. So I think we've pretty much talked about this, but just to say, because I got a little bit off track, is prioritize. How are you going to prioritize your life so that your actions are making the most impact they can for the most beings? And that's not an easy thing to do. And in a way, you could say the majority of Dharma practice is teaching us how to prioritize our life in a meaningful way, because we're spiritual children most of the time, and we don't. If we were set to our own priorities, we would not be doing the best for the most amount of people. We'd be doing what's best for us, our singular person, most of the time. So meditating is a really important priority in a spiritual practice and is really serving all beings when you are able to sit quietly with yourself. They call it a natural nirvana when you meditate, which when I'm really not wanting to meditate, I just think, but I could go into natural nirvana. And what that means is that when you are sitting still and you are not speaking, it is impossible to commit the 7 deeds of body and speech. You cannot kill someone while you're meditating. You know, you might, you know, go to sleep and then sleepwalk and kill someone, but when you're meditating, you're aware. So you're not killing anyone, you're not stealing anything, right? You're not raping anyone while you're meditating, you're not lying, etc., all the ones of speech, right? So there's a kind of natural nirvana that's created there where there's a level of peace. And then of course you're going in and you're dealing with those 3 of the mind that are like while you're meditating. You know, you take that in, kind of rapid fire of those afflictions. But there's a calmness of the first 7. And even just sitting and recognizing that is a beautiful meditation. To just sit and rejoice and go, my body is calm. I'm not hurting anyone right now. I'm relieved from all of the challenge of speaking and all of the obstacles that I have in the way I harm others when I speak, which is an art in and of itself, how to speak, right? Just enjoy the peace of that. So meditating is key. Keeping your ethics is key. Some kind of study is key. These priorities, three primary priorities in your life, ethics would mean serving others as well, okay? So meditating, serving others, keeping your ethical living, and some form of study like coming to classes like this. And then, you know, the rest of your life can start to prioritize itself around that. I know many of you have already made those changes, but we can sort of keep fine-tuning and keep asking ourselves what's going to be best. Okay, we'll keep going here on ethics, and then we'll take a little break. So the next one is failing to break a rule out of compassion. And so this is the one I was talking about where in extraordinary circumstances you might break those seven, one of those seven, okay? So you might lie to protect someone from themselves, you know, like maybe someone you know who's trying to get clean from alcohol comes over and you're having a party and, you know, and they say like, well, is there any alcohol in the house? And you say no. You know, like you don't even want to open that door for them. You know, then it's a different, the karma of your love for that being overcomes the karma of lying in that moment. So it's not that somehow you didn't lie. You did lie. We can't pretend we didn't lie. So this is not that it erases the action. But the negative imprint of lying is overcome by the intention of love. You see? So this is why you must, it's a vow at this level of your practice that you must break the rule out of compassion. Because here we're focused on love more importantly than sort of rules. Okay? At a lower level of practice, you just stick to the rules no matter what. Because you don't have enough wisdom yet to work relatively with other beings. You don't have enough power in yourself. So you're just like, no, I will never lie no matter what. I cannot lie. You know, I cannot. And this is in the Banyan deer story, if you remember. This is the other deer, what is it called? What's the other herd called? I can't remember right now. Branch deer, thank you. The branch deer's herd, you know, who said, no, these are the rules. You know, I'm sorry that you're pregnant. I'm sorry that it came up on you, but these are the rules. You know, and that is a metaphor, a symbolic for a whole level of practice. And he's not wrong. In his level of practice, he's not wrong. And the banyan deer is symbolic of the bodhisattva vow, who's strong enough in their ethics to be able to understand how to relatively bend things in a way that's going to serve a greater good. Okay? So you have to, just because you take bodhisattva vows doesn't necessarily mean you're ready to do that yet. Okay? But it's starting to point you towards that possibility. Or like, for instance, if it was idle speech or something like that, and you're with someone who's grieving, or you're with someone who's in a situation where it would be helpful for them if you just chatted. You know, or if you just put on some music and like danced and hung out or something like that, you know, out of service to them. Great. Again, you know, the compassion overcomes. So at this level, at the bodhisattva level, we're working relatively with other beings, always with the intention of what is going to be of the greater service to them. And if we're focused on our own dogma, our own rules, we're actually tracking back to a lower level of selfishness. Okay? Maybe you guys have read, there's this story of these two Zen monks. It's an old story. And they're like crossing a river, and there's a young beautiful woman who needs to cross the river, and the one monk picks her up and puts her on his shoulders, and you know, you're not, if you're a monk, you're not supposed to touch women. I mean, on a hardcore level, okay? Old school. This is an old school story. And so he, you know, puts her on her shoulders, and they cross the river, and he puts her down, and she's so grateful, and they go off, and then the monks continue walking, and a few miles later, the other monk says to him, this is really bad. You broke a vow. You know, you not only did you touch a woman, but you like put her on your shoulders, you know, and this is not good. And the other monk turns to him and he says, oh, are you still carrying her? I put her down a couple miles ago. You know, and it's like, it's that thing where we get latched onto dogma in our mind, what is right or wrong. And we miss then opportunities to help other beings in relative situations, okay? The 3 of the mind always holds, but the 7 of the body are flexible, okay? But you have to know your own power, you have to know your own level, okay? So I'll just say a little bit about the big version of this one, which is killing. And in order to have the strength to kill someone out of compassion, and there are stories of this, you would have to be able, first of all, you would be a bodhisattva who has like mastered the 6 perfections. You would have to be able to transfer that being's consciousness into a higher consciousness, there are actual practices for this, for how to transfer consciousness. In other words, you would be able to make sure, you would know that you were not sending that being down, okay, to a hell realm or something like that. You would be able to, so along with that, you would be able to see all of their past lives and all of their future lives. So you'd be able to see the stream of their karma, okay? And of course, you would be doing it out of compassion. There would be zero, not even a thought of anger in your mind or some kind of violence. It would be all out of love, right? So unless you're a being like that, there's no space for killing. Not only another human being, but I would say, you know, any other life form that you have the opportunity. I mean, killing a mosquito. Can you send that mosquito's mind on to a higher realm? And if not, leave it be, you know? Just let it go, blow it away or something, but don't kill it, right? You can see that when you start to really keep your ethics in a clear way for yourself, your life will have to change. You know, your life will naturally have to shift around. Yeah. All right, next one. Being engaged in wrong livelihood. So there are 5 types of wrong livelihood. Flattery. So if your job includes some kind of flattery, you know, to live, that you would, which is a type of lying in a way. You know, it means you're flattering the person in order to try to get something from them, right? Hinting. You know, we do this all the time where it's sort of like, Luna, did you bring any chocolate today? You know, like we don't have the strength just to say, I would really like chocolate. Can you give me some chocolate? So we just sort of do that thing where it's like, what do you know about that thing, right? So they're trying to help us be very direct in our way of relating to other beings. It's not helpful for others to not be able to be open and direct about what you're interested in. Can anyone, is there a livelihood that people can think of sort of right away that has to do sort of with hinting? A car salesman? Maybe. That's certainly flattery for sure. You know, you look great in that car, you know, or I always hate it when I go buy clothes and, you know, it's like you're just looking for clothes and the person's like, that color's so good for you. Oh, you look so good. It's like, really? And of course, we're all so in need. We're like, really? It is good on me. It's true, you know? Baiting. Baiting is when you give a little bit because you want to get more out of the person. So it's like you give them a little bit of what they want because you're hoping to get a lot from them, or something like that. And this is talking about at the level of livelihood, like this is how you live, this is how you make your money. But you can ask yourself too, are you going through your life like that? You know, do you give the person the strawberry because you're hoping that they'll like drive you home because your car is broken? You know, in these little ways that we bait people. It's a very cruel way to relate to other people. It's not direct and it's not honest. Again, if you need something, ask for it. You know, figure out how to create the karma so that people can give you what you need, or you can at least create the consciousness where you recognize you have enough. But try to identify when you're baiting. We do it all the time in social situations. Or we give someone a little compliment, you know, because we're hoping like later we know we're going to ask them for something a little bit more intense later, and so we just, you know, make a point to be a little bit nicer to them. Horrible, horrible, horrible. And then forcing, hassling, or harassing. So, you know, this is like full-on violence in some way to another, so that they give you what you want. And then pretending. Okay, so not being honest, not being open about your situation. You know, lying on your what are those called? When you go get a job. Yeah, your resume, your application, your resume, your CV. Clearly, I haven't filled one of those out in a while, but you know, like this happens often. I work with college students, and it's like this comes up sometimes. Like, well, maybe I should just put that I've done some of these things because like I don't really have anything to put on my resume, you know. And you go, no, you know, you're 21 years old. What are they going to expect that you've done? Start a corporation or something like that? Like, it is, you know, it is what it is. It's always, always better for others that you are honest. Even if it doesn't work out for you in the moment, in the long run, and we need to look at the long run in these things, it is better for others to know who you are. Because if you do lie about something, if you do pretend, you know, you say to someone like, oh yeah, I know CPR. You know, I could be a lifeguard, I know CPR. And you don't, and the situation comes to bear, that's not helpful. Right? It's not helpful for the other person. You know, all the way down to like, I don't know, being able to flip a burger as a short order cook. If you don't know how to do that and you lie, you're not serving anyone. So it's just self-serving, okay? And then one other one, which is not so much included in the traditional, but I put it here, it's sometimes we include it, is any kind of occupation that harms another. So you can think about that. And in a way, of course, if we're getting really subtle, any occupation could be harming others, but we just need to think about, is it something that's really a situation? Are you selling alcohol? Are you selling drugs? Are you selling, you know, some kind of violence in some way or another? Are you working in advertising in such a way that you're harming others because you're constantly making them feel like they don't have enough or something like that, right? So it may mean that you get out of that livelihood. It also might mean that you learn how to work in that livelihood in a meaningful way, which is possible too, okay? So there's an exception to this, which is that if you're in a dangerous profession and you're trying to get out. So we had a similar one to this last week. So if, for instance, you were selling drugs or you were you know, in some situation where it's a bit tricky to leave, you know, or like, I don't know, you're in the mob or something like that. I always think the mob is from some other time, but like there are mobs all over the world going on in a really intense way. I was having a conversation about this, and my grandmother grew up in Chicago, across the street from Al Capone's mother's house. And apparently, this is total sidebar, but we're about to take a break. But apparently every weekend Al Capone would come and visit his mother. And the entire police situation in Chicago would never go there, which is sort of an amazing bodhisattva activity because Al Capone's mother had no idea what Al Capone was doing. And so they were just protecting the mother's view of her son. So they would let her son go and have a meal, like it was like every Saturday or Sunday, I can't remember. He would go and have this meal with his mother, and no one would go and touch him. And then like as soon as he'd like drive around the corner, the police would start to follow him again. You know, it was sort of amazing. So if you're trying to get out of the livelihood, then, you know, then you're doing your best. Okay, forgetting yourself and acting wild or frivolous. So this is not so much about the outer action. It's really about the inner action. Sorry, did I just miss a page? Oh, no, okay. So you could think about this like, when do you take pleasure in meaningless activities? When are you losing your view of serving others? You could call any of that a frivolous activity. So it's not so much like, I had this once, I was at a retreat and I was singing and dancing spontaneously, as often happens, and one of the other people there were like, Mira, remember that vow of acting, you know, acting wild. It was so sweet. I remember thinking, you had seen nothing, like, but just thinking about yourself in the sense of with other people, are you encouraging other people to waste time, to waste their time? You know, are you engaging them in activities that take them away from what it is that they're trying to do with their life in a meaningful way? You know, are you causing someone to act goofy just because you want to goof off for a while? And that's harmful for yourself and the other. Yeah, I rethought about these exceptions, but I put them in your reading. I mean, these are traditional exceptions, but I've been thinking more deeply about these exceptions sort of overall. I think some of them are questionable. But so if you're seriously trying to stop, I often think with this one, I felt like a habit I had to curb as I started these practices was that the habit to sort of like interject a joke or interject a witticism into a conversation, which I recognized was really because I just wanted to know that like I could make the other person laugh, or like, you know, I could feel witty in that moment, which to me I recognize as a totally frivolous activity, and not only that, is breaking the other person's conversation, you know. So I went through a period where I was seriously trying to stop that, but it was just it's just a social habit. Like, it was the way I would communicate with people. So I would notice and go, I'm doing it. It's coming out of my mouth. Stop, cease that now, you know, but it's like already coming out. So if you're really trying to stop, of course, then you have an awareness, and you know, you're not breaking the vow, but actually you're strengthening the vow because you're bringing the awareness into your mind and going, this is exactly what I don't want to be doing. Mark that. It's clear. Now stop doing that, okay? To stop another person's grief or depression. So we talked about this a little bit before. And here's my question about the exception, because I think if you were doing this to stop another person's grief or depression, it's not an exception from the vow. You're actually serving the other person in a good way, okay? So if the other person just wants to watch a TV show with you or something like that, or, you know, every time I go home and visit my parents, my father wants to watch some movie, you know, he wants to show me some movie, and I really don't want to watch the movie, but it's the way he connects with me, so fine, you know, we'll watch the movie. To distract another from a bad deed, okay? So, you know, someone's about to harm another and you go, hey, what's up? You know, you just like try to distract them somehow, you know, put up the screen, some kind of screen, and turn their attention away from it. And then to create a more welcoming environment. So again, these last three, to me, they're not so much exceptions from the vow as they're ways to keep the vow in a really positive way. So it's not so welcoming for others to have some real dour and, you know, serious space. You want to create a space that's warm. Okay, maybe we should take the break there, because the next one I want to talk a little bit about. So yeah, why don't we take a 10? So we'll take a 10 till 3.